In the first reading, God appoints Ezekiel as watchman. A watchman was someone who would stand at the tower and look out for the enemy. He would warn everyone in the city if enemies approached. If the watchman failed his job to stand guard, the city would be attacked and taken over by the enemy. So the failure of the watchman to do their job could lead to death for some or all. Well, next time you are driving down Onondaga Lake Parkway or any place geese gather, scan the flock. You'll see most of them with their heads down pecking at the grass. But there will always be at least one of the flock that has their head up, looking around. That's their watchman. That goose is looking for danger, so if needed, they all can fly off, avoiding death for some or all. Ezekiel was a watchman, but not for the physical. He was put in charge of the people's spiritual lives. He was to keep it foremost in people's minds that judgment was coming. He was to tell the people that regardless of the responses of those around them, each person had an individual obligation to hear and to obey God. God made Ezekiel accountable for the souls of his neighbors. In a similar way, God has put us too in charge of our neighbors' spiritual lives. We are all held accountable to dissuade those taking advantage of others from their wrongful ways. We are to speak out when we see others being taken advantage of. If not, we will suffer the same fate as the wrongdoer. If we are to fulfill this individual obligation to hear and obey God, how do we do it? We only need to look to the second reading for that answer. Paul tells us to love our neighbors as ourselves. This tells us that if we love others as we do ourselves, we will treat them with the same respect that we treat ourselves. When carrying this through, everything else will fall into place. If we love our spouse, we will not cheat on them. If we love our friends, we will not want what they have to the point of endangering our welfare for that, or we won't steal what others have, or even be jealous over what they have. If we love our neighbor, and as we know, Jesus considers our neighbor to be everyone in the world, we will not look to do harm to others. Love is the basis that keeps us all children of God. Love is not a one-time payment. It can be thought of as the interest that accrues on a loan we take out from God by way of being here. When we die, we pay back the loan to God via our souls, and the interest that accrued on the loan or our soul is all the love that we gave and that we received while we were here doing God's will. This love we have as God's greatest gift holds our families together, our membership in this church together, even our country together. In the second reading, God made Paul accountable in telling us about his genuine love. Listening to St. Paul about genuine love leads us to the gospel, where Jesus tells us, by way of the love we have for each other, that we always need to reconcile ourselves with each other. Jesus gives us this lesson on how to settle our disputes when we allow our humanness to ignore the great gift of love. Being human himself, Jesus knows that disputes will arise. He knows that we still love one another, but in the course of time, we cannot possibly always agree on everything. Jesus' method, which has roots in the Jewish tradition, consists of 3 steps. The first step is for the person who has been wronged to go to the other person who has wronged them to privately settle the situation. I think this is what most of us would like, that when we say or do something to someone, they come to us first, not going to all of our friends and family who would listen. That's not true love. It's not always easy, but when done in the context of love, this way brings us closer together. True reconciliation is two-way, and it cannot be completed without the love that God gives us. Jesus goes on, knowing that not all wrongs are easily settled. He says that if we go directly to the person we are in dispute with, but peace is not made, then we are to seek out others that are fair and responsible. The group is then to speak to the one with whom we have the dispute and work to make an agreement between the parties that is equitable. However, that too may not work. So Jesus says to take it to the authorities, and in his day it was the church. If the person with whom we have issue still doesn't come to settlement, then the final outcome was to walk away. Jesus' statement of treating them like Gentiles or tax collectors was because in his day, those were the people who did not adhere to the Jewish traditions and beliefs. Since the final decision was that of the church, then any agreement would be meaningless to non-believers. Today, what still holds true is that when we are wronged and we make every effort to make peace, and if it does not work, God will not hold this against us. We will not suffer the fate of the wrongdoers because we tried to be the peacemaker. We will be held accountable for our actions, the love we give, and the way we make peace with each other. Ezekiel is our example of accountability. We are all accountable to live the word and to bring that word to others. We are all charged with a task of making peace with each other. And we do this with God's love. 3 steps to salvation: accountability, reconciliation, and love.